In this demonstration, we'll go a little bit more into depth with the different properties you can assign to fields within a table. So let's open up the database that we've been working on, and we'll ignore the security warning. And we'll open up the navigation pane and open up the students table, and we'll shrink that to give us some more space. And now if we go to the design view for this table, because right now we're not interested in modifying the data in the table, we want to change the design of the table. Let's add a couple fields. Let's add a province field and a phone field. So to add a field, we find a place where we want it. Let's put it right after the first name and last name. And right click on the birthday row and click insert rows. It'll insert a new row above the row that you currently have highlighted. So we'll insert a row and we'll call this province, and the data type for province would be text. And then we'll also add another field called phone number, and that will also be text. Now we want to add some limitations to these fields. For example, province codes in in Canada have 2 characters. So Ontario, the province code would be ON. So if we want to limit people to only being able to put 2 characters in, we can do that through the field properties down here at the bottom. Up until this point, we've kind of been ignoring the different options down here. So the field size currently is 255 characters of text. So let's limit that to 2 characters. And because most students are going to live in Ontario, there's a default value option here where we can actually put in ON for Ontario. And you'll notice as soon as we did that, it actually used the auto capitalization and it made it into an uppercase O and a lowercase n. So to get it to specify 2 uppercase letters ON, we put quotations around it, and then it'll stick. Now with phone number, we also want to limit the field size so that people can't put in really long phone numbers. So if we want the numbers plus hyphens plus an area code, we can limit that field size to say 12 characters. So you can't put in a phone number that's longer than 12. And if we go up to the first name and last name, currently you can actually enter students in without putting in a first name or last name. It's not going to complain if you leave those fields blank, but we do want a first name and last name for our students. So if you see down here, it says required and it's checked off as no. So let's change that to a yes, meaning that this field is a required field. And let's go to the next field, which is last name, and we can also check that off as required yes. So now you can't create a record unless you put some sort of data in the first name and last name field. Now if we scroll down to the midterm and final grade, these are numbers, but what we can do is we can put in something called the validation rule, meaning that if you put in a number that doesn't adhere to this rule, it's going to complain and it's not going to let you put that in. So a midterm and final can only be between the values of 0 and 100. If someone tries to put in 105, it's not going to let you if you put in the right rule. So for a validation rule, we use some mathematical logic. So we would put something like greater than or equal to 0 and less than and equal to 100. And we can copy that. Let's copy that down to, we click on final, and we'll put the same validation rule on the final grade. So let's go to our datasheet view so we can actually start putting some information into this table. And as soon as we do that, again, because we made design changes to the table, we're going to have to save it first. So let's hit yes. And it's also going to say that our data integrity rules have changed. Because we put in all this different validation and all these changes we did, it's going to change the data integrity rules. So we just hit yes so we can check the table to make sure everything's okay. So when we go to put in a new record down here, you can actually see that the default value has been set to ON for Ontario. So that seems to be working fine. You'll notice that it didn't change any of the records that we had put in earlier. So what we can do is we can go and update these, and you'll notice, well, you can't really notice, but I'm trying to put in a third character and it's not letting me. It's limiting this field to 2 characters. So let's put ON in all these fields. And maybe we'll put Curious George in Alberta. Same thing with phone number. If I were to try and put more than 12 characters in, it's not going to let me. So let's go to this new person here, and we'll put in another name. We'll just call it test student. And if actually we'll leave the last name blank. So if we try and save this record by moving off of the record, and if you recall, you haven't actually written the data to the database until you move off that record. Currently you can just see the little pencil over here, which indicates that that is currently in process and hasn't been written yet. So let's click off this record, and it's going to kick up a fuss. It's going to say you have to enter a value into the last name field, and we're going to hit OK. So it's not going to let us save this until we actually put something in the last name field. And with the midterm and final, let's put in a grade of 78 for the midterm, and for the final let's try and put in 107. And again, once we try and do this, it's going to say that the validation rule that we just put in is not following that, so it's not going to let us save this record until we fix that. So let's put it at 100. And it has just kicked up a complaint because we haven't put in a primary key. And that's what I forgot to do, is the primary key is a student number. So it says you need a student number, so let's put one in. And now everything was fine after we moved off that record, so that record has been saved to the database.